Good morning, YouTube. Doug Ferguson on here again. Today is the 14th day of August 2026. What's going on, y'all? Well, my man down in Kansas is making money with a $6 cost of gain. That's what he's got going on. So there's a teaser. We're going to hold that one to the end. I got to share this cute little story, kind of one of these dad joke type deals. Rode along, took my daughter to school yesterday, and I make the dad joke that, hey, you shouldn't put Chrome on books. That sounds kind of silly to me. For those of you who don't know, they use those Chromebooks for their schoolwork, keep track of their schedule and those kinds of things. And she's like, oh, Dad, we had this teacher, I think it was like a year ago. She said a year or two ago, wasn't going to use the Chromebook, going to throw it back, do it old school. Gave the kids textbooks, told them, hey, you got to take this book home, put a book cover on it. And so my daughter's like, yeah, I put one of those paper book covers on it. She goes, man, that was so weird. I had to kind of chuckle at that. But I was like, back when I was in school, every time we started a new chapter, the books got new covers. And the reason was, we put those paper book covers on there, kids write notes on that book cover. So then when we took tests, you put your book in the cubby hole in the desk. And then when you needed a little help on the test, you pulled that book out, you glance down at it. That's how we cheated on tests. I shouldn't say we because I never did it. I always knew I'd get caught. But a lot of my classmates did that. And she told me today the kids will use the note function on their phones, type the notes into that, then they screenshot it, set that as the lock screen on their phone. So now they can just reach up, tap their phone like they're trying to see what time it is, and they got their notes and everything, right there. So to me, it was one of those things that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Now, I did see a big change this week. Took a little 25-mile detour. I drive down this highway regular, but you know how it is. We're always, hurry up, got to get there type deal. But the weatherman, paid guesser, has been messing his guess quite a bit lately, and that has screwed up hay plans for a lot of us in this area. And so, I'm kind of in that situation. So I felt like I had a little time yesterday, took this detour, went past this old feed yard I worked at back in 1997. And I mentioned this job a little bit on that podcast I did with Crockett Carruthers, the Wealthy Cowboy Show, that I learned a lot about feeding cattle by screwing up other people's cattle. This was that job. That yard was mismanaged, and that was part of the reason for bringing me in there was to straighten some things out. And, as a teenager, I was in way over my head on that. And so there was a steep learning curve there. And the takeaway point was is because it was so mismanaged and everything, the work environment was tough. And I wrote an article about this years ago and tried to get it published, but nobody would publish it because I guess in today's standards, it is considered abusive. I have never seen it that way. I just saw it as mismanaged. I saw it as an opportunity. And so there were lessons learned, valuable experience gained, but it was also a job that allowed me to define who I am by stepping up and answering that challenge. Like I said, the learning curve. I mean, in the beginning, there weren't very many people liking me or very fond of me, but after a few months started to come around. And anyway, I loved that job. And to me, that was the point of the article. That was what I was trying to get across. See, and this has always kind of been some of my advice based off my own experience that if you can go into that kind of work environment and you love it, you're doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. I had one guy, he came through my marketing school and he kind of admitted this to me in his own roundabout way. Ranching was too tough. That's why he pivoted and became a bookkeeper. So see right there, he figured out he ain't cut out to be a ranch manager. And probably why I got fired from all them jobs. But if you can go into that work environment and you love it and you can thrive, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. To me, that is the lesson. I wasn't trying to promote abuse or anything like some people accuse me of. It's just a good way of figuring things out when you're young. Because see, anybody can go into a well-managed operation that's got good fences and good, well-maintained late model equipment and anybody can work in that environment. But I drove by there yesterday, kind of got some mixed feelings about it. Um, that feed yard got hit by a tornado in the early 2000s, and the guy that owned it wasn't going to rebuild. And so me and another young guy in the area, we got the feed bunk out of that place. So the feed bunks that are in my pens today, a lot of them came from there. I was allowed to go in with a cutting torch, start cutting out sucker rods, stuff like that. And so a lot of that is what I reused to build my pens. To me, the funny thing was is when I worked for him, um, I built a lot of those pins. So I welded it together. Then here I was like a decade or so later cutting out the pins that I built. But when I drove by there the other day, the perimeter fence that went around all the way around the outside of the pins is still there. The east pins are still there. The cross fences are removed, but the feed alley's still there, just no feed bunks. So they got this big steel pipe perimeter fence around the place, and there's this huge house sitting right in the middle of it, and two large sheds. So if you follow the Mr. Cattle Master Facebook page, that's why I took a picture of the loadout because I wasn't going to take a picture of somebody's home like that and post it on social media, just trying to respect their space and whatnot. But I got some mixed feelings about seeing the house and the sheds there, kind of breaks my heart to see that it isn't still a feed yard today, but that's life, things change. But brought back for me, some good memories. Uh, like I said, it allowed me to define who I am. It's come to my attention. We've been getting a lot of feedback on these YouTube videos. There's a lot of people that are not cattle people watching these videos. So if you're tuning into this one, trying to pick up some nuggets, there it is. It's all out there. Everything we're going to talk about from this point forward is all going to be cattle marketing. Kind of what my target audience is interested in. But anyway, I do appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate the feedback. Like I said, the paid guesser is screwing up his guesses. We've been catching some little showers screwing up hay plans, so I did get to take in a female sale this week. And this female sale that I watched, I've got some little notes written down here, but it had that classic deviation scale take place. And so what I mean by that is the cows progressively got older, the price progressively got lower. So this sale was kind of back into that deal again. Um, this was on the 5-year-old-ish type cows, 5, 7-year-old cows. There was $1,000 difference between first periods and third periods, with the first periods outselling the third periods. And, watching this on a computer screen, I really couldn't see that there was that much difference between the cows. And some people might think, well, that doesn't make sense. So I think it makes perfectly good sense because the buyers are telling you what they want. That's how I translate that. Bred heifers had to weigh close to 1,100 pounds. A 9 weight heifer in the third period, 4,800 would stop them. If that heifer weighed close or over 1,100 pounds, they were selling 53 to 5,500. So, roughly 175-pound weight difference was worth $500 to $700. So right there to me, that's an easy way to add value by feeding some weight onto those heifers. And we saw it with the cows, the cows too. Body condition absolutely affected their sell price. That's why I always say fat is the prettiest color on a cow. I'll also admit right here, this is one of those points that maybe I contradict myself. If you want to label it that way, that's fine because, I realize it myself. It is my personal belief the cow should eat what is attached to the ground. However, when you're looking at this kind of a value capture, it is not going to cost $500 to $700 to feed 175 pounds onto those bred heifers. So I don't care if that's going to be like a substitute type deal, if you give them, a few pounds of distiller's grain or whatever, pellets, that kind of thing. I don't even care if you're going to pull them in and put them in a pen and feed them a little uh, corn silage to get that weight on there. To me, the point is if we're raising these animals to make a profit, in this case, it would absolutely pay. Of course, now you've got the added feed cost in there, but you're going to recapture that on that kind of a value capture. So kind of wanted to throw that one out there. Again, sticking with the flesh. If the cow is in fleshy condition on pairs, they were worth steadily $500 more. The 3-in-1 pairs had no extra value added to them. In fact, they were the only ones in the offering that sold under their intrinsic value, and the reason being I'm adding in the value of the calf that's on board when I calculate those. And then the only other one that didn't sell over the intrinsic value was the broken mouth cows that were in that second to third period. They sold right at their intrinsic value. So everything else in this offering sold over their intrinsic value. So there is that. So I want to highlight some trades here, and I want to start with this one. You could sell that old pair, and I'm talking about that short, solid, broken mouth pair, and replace her with a 3-year old, the 3-year old of all the cattle in the offering that is in the first, the second period. And here's how that trade translates. It would have us selling $1,170 value into the market and getting paid $2,050 for it. Man, that's an outstanding trade. And again, I'm going to echo the point. This is why I'm not interested in deflecting depreciation. I am interested in running this business in a manner that generates positive cash flow and profit. And so right there, I just took care of that old cow problem, replaced her with that young one that still is not yet in her prime and got paid to do it. You are either doing sell by marketing or you're not. You know, there's that old saying, he who chases two rabbits catches neither. So you're either going to spend your days deflecting depreciation or you're going to spend your days making prosperous sell by trades, but it is not both. We could still sell that same old pair, replace her with the 5-year-old and the third, you know, the one that the smart people tell you to sell or should be selling. In this case, she's the buy against that old pair. That trade would have us selling $715 value in the market, getting paid just under $1,900 for it. I mean, mic drop right there, y'all. That's how marketing's done. That's how we do these things in a way that we can run the business, make a profit, support the family type deal. Now here's some others where I'm just going to pick on gestation period, stick with the same age, but 5-year-old cows in the first period outsold 5-year-old cows in the third period. So you could sell the 5-year-old cow in the first, buy that 5-year-old in the third, and sell $83 value in the market and get paid $183 for it. One of the reasons, given that the gestation period is so different, but that intrinsic value difference is so narrow, is it was the weight difference in the cows. It's the cull value of the cows that's making that one tight. Or we could sell a 3-year-old pair, buy back a 3-year-old in the third period. That trade would have us selling zero value into the market and getting paid $950. And so right there, you know, we marketed this pair, this calf. We got this cow that's in the third period. She's going to clip the coupon soon. And, you know, maybe we sell that one as a pair, or maybe you're looking to switch calving seasons or something. So see, we don't need to pay premiums and pay more into the market than the value that we're selling into to switch calving seasons. This one has us getting paid to switch calving seasons. Beautiful things about sell by marketing here. But then I want to highlight this other one. What if we took that 5-year-old in the first period and want to keep an open replacement heifer or buy an open replacement heifer? And so I'm using 5-weight heifers for this example. And this is how that trade would translate. If we sold the 5-year-old in the first, bought the 5-weight heifer, we sold $925 value in the market and we get paid $1,500 for it. So see right there, now the math is telling us that, yep, we can bring these open heifers on board, turn them into a factory. Here's the point that I don't want you all to miss. Before this market meltdown in July, this trade would have been really tight to pull off. In fact, it would have been so tight I'd been like, there's going to be better options. It's a trade that I wouldn't personally do. It's one that I wouldn't really recommend unless you just absolutely wanted to do it, but it was very tight. This trade would not have been possible before the market meltdown. And it's not going to be possible with those 5-year-old cows in the third period, since the first period cows, like I said, outsold them. Or no, I'm sorry, it would be possible, but it's just not going to be as attractive. Make sure I get it right. But before this market meltdown in July, the math would tell us that that 5 weight should go into the stocker operation. And given what the price of fat cattle was at that time, she should go on to the feed yard. So, see, I don't understand why people are so hurt in the butt about this market meltdown, because it just created an opportunity that wasn't there a couple months ago. And, I feel like I got to mention this because I've never got to say this publicly, but right here now it fits. A number of years ago, back when me and the old Cosner used to speak on a regular basis, and I mean every week and sometime multiple times a day on the phone, he would call me, and I had bought 750 head of these black 4-weight heifers. And he says, "Oh, you need to go through, sort out the best ones, breed them. Oh, you'll capture all this appreciation." And I'm like, "That is not a sell by trade." And he said, "Yeah, but you need some experience doing this." My counter to that comment was, sell by marketing built this place. Sell by is what allowed me to take that original $7,000 that bought those very first 18 head of cute Kiwi calves and turn it into a 7-figure deal. Why on earth would I want to abandon sell by marketing for this cockamamie theory? I need more than that. Well, you need experience doing this. No, I'm going to reject that idea, because, see, this is when I was kind of starting to get suspicious of him. You take all those thousands of hours him and I spent talking, I never once heard him mention ever a sell by trade. It was always stuff like this. And so, and to tell you how that story ended full loop, bring it to a close, is I was awful glad that I didn't do it. Based off what the market did that year, it was better for all those heifers to stay stockers and not breed them. So now we're going to switch gears here. I'm going to go to the stocker cattle feeder type markets. Value gain was good on there. We did see some leapfrogs in there, but for the most part, the value of gain is easily covering cost of gain. I'm sitting there at a time right now where I've got maybe 30 to 45 days worth of grass left for these stockers that are running out right now. But I'm paying real close attention to the market, especially right here in Nebraska. And we saw some of these big strings of yearlings come down. So the market was maybe, call it, three higher this week. Of course, having those big strings in the offering helps boost that price. But I could sort off that high end based off the value gains that I'm seeing in especially the Nebraska, Kansas markets. I could sell that heavy end of cattle, one load, and replace them with these ball and flyweights. And here's why I'm going to mention that, because they were up to 30 cents back this week. So good value capture there, some easy monetary gain, getting a hard wean on those cattle. And that trade would be so cash heavy against on that one load of grass calves that it would almost pay all my pasture rent with one load. My daughter's calves stayed in the background in pens all summer. We market her calves. She pays me my feed bill right there. I've got all the cash I need to cover the pasture rent. And then I have all these other loads coming off grass. So the second load, I would have to market to pay the silage chopper that's going to come here soon and pay the bank the interest that I owe them, and then there will still be money left over after that. So then it will be the loads coming off grass that I market. Those are the ones that I get to do for giggles. Golly, this is why I love fall run so much, y'all. This for rodeo cowboys, the 4th of July period is cowboy Christmas. For those of us that are in the stalker business, the cow calf deal, whatever, fall run is our cowboy Christmas. And my gosh, I've got the itch. I'm so excited right now. I'm loving these numbers. Market meltdown, nothing. I'm loving these values that I'm seeing. Throw this out there. Feeder bulls were up to 30 back this week, so there's a little monetary gain to be captured there. And then even in the southern states, they saw some big strings, or I shouldn't say big strings, but they had a lot of the yearling type cattle in their offering. So if you look at the market reports, you will see value added in the footnotes. So for like the lightweight cattle, that could mean they had around the shots, maybe they're weaned. Of course, then on them yearling type deals, them were load lots. And some of those value added lots were up to 60 cents higher. And if you've been to my marketing school, um, my definition of value added marketing is only value added if you capture the added value. And so, right there, especially in the southern states, very easily to do that. And I've been getting some text messages and calls from some of y'all in the southern states like, hey, you ain't mentioned the southern markets for a while. Well, yeah, if you sold 400 head at your weekly sale, you had a big run. A lot of them weren't even close to 400 head, so it's really hard to say that that was an accurate test of the market. And I was on the phone a few days ago with a cattle buyer from Alabama, and he kind of agreed. He said, yeah, the local sale barns are throwing up prices of these little lightweight peewee calves because they're bringing the big dollars per pound, and he says what they're not telling you is what this group of cattle sold for or what this class of cattle sold for. And I'm, yep, there you go. That's where the valuable buys were, is in those cattle that they're not talking about on their market reports. But I got to throw this one out there for you. The value game real good in the southern states this week. Um, but I will get text messages from a lot of y'all in the southern states, and you're looking at market reports from like Bassett, Valentine, Ogallala, Nebraska, and the text message reads something like, "Oh, your markets in Nebraska are," and then there will be all those flame emojis. Well, how about this? Five weight steers in Lexington, Kentucky on Tuesday outsold five weight steers in Kansas and Nebraska. And I've been getting a lot of these comments on some of the phone calls, and the phone has been on fire the last, I'd say the last month. But anyway, uh, man, I just lost that train of thought. But um, oh my gosh, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, a lot of y'all been talking about what I said on that podcast I did with Mary Jo, that I was buying these cattle out of Tennessee. And the reason it works so well is I could get those loads delivered $25,000 a load cheaper than buying them here in Nebraska. Well, see, things change. So I'm not going to buy them cattle out of if they're Lexington, Kentucky, if they're costing more than I could buy them here in Nebraska. Thing is, shopping is free. It is buying that costs money. So yeah, I'm still going to shop that Tennessee, Kentucky market, but right now they're kind of telling me like, nope, buy them at home. All right. So now I got two guys I want to talk about. One was in Texas, one is from Kansas. Both of these guys have just recently went through my marketing school. One was in the Springfield, Missouri school at the beginning of July. The other one was in the Tyler, Texas school at the end of July. And two totally different ends of the spectrum, but two totally outstanding trades in their own right. So I'm going to start with the guy from Texas, and this was Brangus Heifers to Brangus Heifers. And this guy, um, there was a weight difference on these cattle, 250 pounds. But if you've been through my marketing school, this is the trade that I nicknamed Good Things About to Happen. And so it was that trade. He did the math, cattle square cost, all that stuff, took a picture of it, texted it to me. And the thing that stood out to me was his cost of gain was cheap, would be the word. Even though it still cost money, man, it was cheap. And, and I called him on it. I'm like, you got to dial in them costs and figure them accurate. And he admitted that it was a feed only cost gain. So no pharmaceuticals, trucking costs, no overheads, whatever figured in there. But this trade was so good, he had a return on the gain of just under $4. And of course, then he's got this cheap cost of gain. So we know this is a monster trade. In fact, this one's so good with a cost of gain that cheap and a return on the gain that high. The only reason you need a calculator is to figure out how good it was. And this trade had him making $900 profit based off the numbers he gave me. So that if we figure in all those other costs and bring them in, we know it's not going to be 900. And so yeah, he's got to figure in some of them other costs, but my gosh, monster trade, good for him. What a way to start. And I throw this one out there a lot of times because this has happened to a lot of rookies. They come to my school, they do a trade, they end up with a monster like this. And I kind of don't like them starting with that monster trade because I don't want them to get spoiled and think that it is always this easy. It's not. So, on those kind of deals, stay frosty, get them numbers dialed in. Now let's go to my man in Kansas with the $6 cost of gain. And I'm going to set this up for you. Before he came to my school, he bought some really undervalued four-weight steers. Outstanding buy. I mean, great place to start. And he sold them. His average weight was in the mid fives. Now, he admitted there were some lessons learned because he took some of his steers, commingled them with his dad's. This was a small group. So see, he's just kind of poking a stick at it, which is a good way to start. Just instead of just going 10 toes down with multiple loads, he just grabbed a handful of them, poking a stick at it, and commingled them with his dad's steers. His dad's steers were considerably lighter, and the sale barn didn't do him any favors. They didn't sort the cattle for size. They shotgunned the group. So what ended up happening is he kind of subsidized some of that weight to his dad. Because then by the time you take the average weight, average head count things, he gave some of that weight away. So it showed up on his dad's paycheck and took a little bit away from his paycheck. So lesson learned there. But when we subsidized his dad with that weight, it had these steers that he bought is these four weights gaining less than 3/4 of a pound per day. And so the average daily gain on these steers wasn't that good. But this guy's got all of his costs figured in, and he ended up with a cost of gain of just slightly over $6 a pound. Now, in my marketing schools, I talk about this, and when I'm going through this at this point in the school, I realize it's probably just a lot of hot air at the moment because a lot of y'all don't understand what I'm talking about. But when the cost of gain is higher than the sell price, you end up in an inverted barn card situation. And so with a cost of gain of $6, well, right there we know out of the gate, his cost of gain's higher. And so when he built his barn card, it was inverted, which means the lighter the cattle, the less price per pound he can pay because the cost of gain is so high, the math is going to favor buying weight. That guy from Texas with that cheap cost of gain, his barn card would look completely different. He's going to be really strong on those lightweight cattle because that cheap cost of gain, the math is going to say, hey, if you're doing it that cheap, it makes sense to buy lightweight cattle and feed as much weight on them as you possibly can. So two total opposite ends of the spectrum, but both end in a positive. So anyway, back to this guy in Kansas. When he built his barn card, to give you all context for this, he built a card to find the efficient market value for 250-pound steers. Efficient market value, meaning that is the maximum amount you can pay for replacement cattle and still hit your profit target. And so his card said he could pay 46 cents a pound for 250-pound steers. And I realize this mic doesn't always pick up some of the words I say very clearly, so I'm going to re-say that. 0.46 is what he could pay for a 250-pound steer. Well, I mean, come on. We can't even buy a chronic for that price. So that high cost of gain has him priced out of the market on a lot of steers. But my man was dialed in and he was paying attention. And so he pivoted and he did exactly what I recommend. He bumped his cost of gain up because he sold steers and now he's going to switch to heifers. And he bumped that cost of gain up to $8. This is about to get real good, y'all. But he sold those five-weight steers. He bought five-weight heifers. So there is not a whole lot of weight difference. That swap give him a return on the gain of $38.66. As long as the return on the gain is equal to or higher than your break profit, it is a good trade. That's an outstanding pivot. To be in a situation where he should likely be dead in the water, he's got that sell by mindset. He was not going to give up. He was going to find the option. Now, two things I want to mention here that are extremely important for those of you that have chosen to pay more money and go to somebody else's school and learn how to do shit wrong. The cost to keep calculation kicks this trade out because the math ain't mathing. The orders of operation in that method are wrong. We learned this in grade school. Orders of operation matter. So the cost to keep would kick this trade out. The other thing is, oh, your money's undervalued. You should hang on to it. If you read the book, Good to Great, you do not stop the momentum of the flywheel. And that's exactly what you're doing. It is called sell buy. Your exposure to risk is the time between the sell and the buy. So if you're going to stop the flywheel and hang on to the money, you stop your own momentum. You have opened yourself up to more market risk. We've had a market meltdown. Is it going to continue to go down or is it going to go back up? We do not know. We ain't no better at guessing that than the weatherman. And like I said, he's been getting his wrong. But this guy in Kansas, he found a way to pivot and make this work. But that wasn't his only buyback. He bought back some other cattle that were heavier than the ones he sold. So he did a leapfrog trade, and that trade has him getting paid $172 a head to take 30 pounds home. Here's the other thing I want to mention. Years ago, before anybody had ever heard of me, there is a meeting that is an invitation only that I used to attend. And the facilitator of this meeting wanted to make a point to me and prove that the cattle square does not work on quick trades or trades with poor weight gain. You have to do cost keep calculation. She throws this example up on the screen. I looked at the numbers and I'm like, well, that trade has you making like 15 bucks a head or something. After her 30-minute presentation of going through it her way, the trade had us making just under $14. And there was this Canadian in the room and he says, Doug, how'd you do that so fast in your head? And I was like, man, I just cattle squared it in my head. It was easy because the cost to keep only works if you come back to level. And that's exactly what she did. She basically put the answer in the problem. But people wouldn't know this if they've never actually done sell by trading. See, this is the thing about math. It is fundamental. It doesn't change. We learn the rules to math in grade school. The problem with school is it never taught us how to interpret the math. And that's what I've just done on this video is I interpreted a lot of math for you, showed you all kinds of opportunities. Some of these opportunities did not exist before this market meltdown. I have not said this for a while, but you will run out of money in this cattle deal before you ever run out of opportunities. That's how good this is when you're a sell by marketer and you know how to interpret the math and spot these opportunities. That's why I like to have everybody that comes through my school do this by hand because what the hand does, the mind remembers. Spreadsheets and all these subscription sites, like, man, I'll throw that out there. The subscription sites that have been demoed to me have there's coding errors, so it's not going to spit out the correct answer when it builds barn cards. Something to think about. Y'all wasting money on the subscription sites, and then you're throwing money away in the sale barns by bidding the value gain away on some of these cattle. But anyway, man, smoking good times. Proud of both of these guys. Been getting a lot of feedback from them two schools. There's a lot of people doing some trades. They're working through their math, working through the numbers. Been getting a lot of phone calls. You know, they've been needing some help trying to interpret some of it. That's what I'm here for. We do have two schools left. You can go to mrcattlemaster.com, get signed up for them. Both of those will be in Nebraska in the months of November, December. If you want to learn how to do this kind of stuff and spot all these opportunities that you ain't able to see right now, we'll see you in November, December. Until then, talk to you next week.